Good afternoon, gentlemen. We are talking about the new production that was announced at GalaxyCon in Austin, Texas, called Gabriel and the Guardians. I'm with David Cunningham, who's off camera, unfortunately, Al Moore, and Jason Moody.
Yeah, traveling.
Yeah, listen, you guys are all over the place, man. This is a new project that you guys are working with Angel Studios on.
Yeah, new. I think new stuff in general for us. So I mean, we've some of us have worked on different shows, but never on a show where we were having to go and promote it ourselves and do all that. So it's really cool.
Awesome. And David just popped in. So
there he is. Look, there he is.
There he is.
When I read, so my background for you guys as well is I have a master's degree in theology, and then my family's from Mesopotamia. So when I got that whole email about this project, I was like, man, I wish I knew these guys beforehand. I could have done something in Aramaic for them.
Yeah,
that'd have been cool,
dude. Yeah,
well, don't worry, maybe for the follow-up series.
Not too late, you know. Maybe, yeah, we could catch up. It'd be cool to talk offline, maybe.
Absolutely. But we'll worry about the future projects for later. We got to worry about this one right now. What was the inspiration for this? Especially to get Gabriel and the Guardians, because we don't have too much family entertainment anymore. And if it is, it's always like Veggie Tales, and it's for like 3-year-olds, or it's for adults trying to teach their kids about their faith.
I think that for me, COVID, having really not been in the industry or not even intending to make any kind of TV show or anything like that, I was my wife and I had been listening to a podcast called The Bible Project, and just really,
Hold on real quick. Did you hear the Aramaic voice in The Bible Project?
Yes. Yeah.
That's me.
Come on, man.
That's me.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I haven't even heard it. All I know is that it was done.
That's funny. Yeah, no. Yeah, so that podcast became pretty influential, and as it inspired me to just begin to really dig into Genesis, and kind of being raised, fundamental evangelical, the Old Testament's just something that wasn't a big part of outside of just the Sunday school stories. I had never really spent a lot of time in the Old Testament, completely honest. But as we really fell in love with this podcast, I just began to become fascinated with the world that I was reading about in Genesis, particularly this pre-flood world. And then you hit Genesis 6, and at that they're like, oh wow, this is amazing that I've heard of. Were giants that walked the earth, and they were the fallen Elohim. This is crazy. And so I had to learn more about that. And then as I dug deep into both the scriptures of Genesis and then the other midrash that is kind of surrounding, other texts that are written, that tell some of the same stories that are supposed to take place at the same time. You begin to find that this is set in a ancient Mesopotamian, proto-Semitic world, and so I started, wanting to tell these stories. I started just drawing characters, as we were all bored during COVID, and a lot of the stuff that I was doing creatively before that, I just wasn't doing anymore. And so I'm telling my kids these, just the story of Noah from just kind of a different spin, a different perspective, something that felt a little more just ancient, and something that less Bible robes and sort of old man with a gray beard on a boat. I was like imagining the story, filling in some of those gaps, and taking in some of the really cool Sumerian and other, Hebrew texts that surround that story. And I'm telling my kids about it, and I'm drawing these characters, and I was just having fun with it. And then it comes to a point where my daughter is like, she was really into anime, and I was drawing in this anime style, and she's like, this is a show that's dealing with Bible stories that I'd actually watched, Dad. And I was like, oh, that's it. Like, that's what this is about. And, it just kind of became this moment, this kind of christening of like, okay, this is what I'm going to begin to move towards. And I started reaching out to different people, and I came in contact with David, and he looked at my script and was like, not a bad start. You know what I mean? Right. I hand it off to you, David. You got my script. And
yeah, sure. So I was working on the Wingfeather Saga series at the time. And I had been working for the past several years on writing. I've written some episodes for Superbook. I co-created a show called Gizmo Go and did some writing for that. I've written a novel and stuff. And so like I kind of, for the past, writing a focus and like really just like telling really good stories, mostly because of like what you said at the beginning. I have been very disappointed, to say the least, in kind of quote unquote Christian media. It's like, why are we not making better stuff? And I looked at a lot of guys like Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, George MacDonald, going back to I would say the godfather of fairy tales, and kind of like, why aren't we telling really great stories? Like, why is it always prescriptive? Why is it always about lessons and teaching? Film is an emotional medium. Film is about connecting with your audience on an emotional level. It's not about trying to tell them to do this, tell them to do that. It's about going on a journey, a story, an adventure. It's about experiencing something. And so anyway, so I got Jason's script, and so I had a bit of notes, and I thought at the time that I would never hear from him again, because I gave him all these notes that was like, I think we kind of need to rewrite this.
yeah.
And it wasn't because Jason was doing those things that I was mentioning. It was more just, Jason will admit he wasn't a writer at the time. And I'm kind of a big kind of story structure kind of person. I look at kind of classic storytelling, like things like Lord of the Rings, things like, look at a lot of Joseph Campbell stuff, the hero's journey, and like what makes a good story that resonates with people. And there's certain structure, there's certain stuff that you want to, that kind of needs to happen, that resonate with people, And so I gave him all these notes, and then he got back and he was like, oh, like I like these notes. And so we started working together, like really like just kind of like here and there, like weekends, and like sometimes at night, like just kind of sporadically. And we're just working on writing a pilot script of the series. We're trying to figure it out. Okay, what is this thing? And at first it was really like a fictional take on like a fantasy, like Genesis, right? And we're kind of like riding in between this line of like historical fiction and fantasy. And basically we got some feedback that was like, you should just make this a fantasy series.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, that feels right. Yeah, it really feels right. And it was one of those things for me personally where I always kind of looked at the parables that Jesus gave, and I always thought that it was interesting that essentially Jesus, what he did is he went to the crowd and he said, once upon a time there was a guy that owned a field, and he tells a story, right? And he doesn't go in and say, well, this is this principle, and here's the theology behind it, and this is the philosophy behind it, and here's the back here, and you should do this.
He would use those parables, and he would hyperlink though to deep truths and literal, the Torah, parts of the Torah, scriptures in the Torah, principles in the Torah. But he would wrap those truths that were in the Torah in these beautiful parables. And so, that's where we were kind of like, what if we could kind of have a world that was inspired, we could still do that, like this fantasy world that's inspired by the historical lores, myths, writings, and texts from that time, from the Hebrews and the Sumerians and the Akkadians. And what if we had a fantasy world that was inspired by that cultures, but then we tell these truths and these narratives in a once upon a time way. And that's kind of,
so very Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings type influence as well, because that's what Tolkien and that's what Lewis were able to do.
Where Tolkien's using he's using like Northern European mythology to create this world, and he's marinating it in scriptural principles for sure. But his world is inspired by the mythologies and the lores of Northern European cultures. Lewis did the same thing, but he was inspired by Arthurian legends. He's inspired by Roman and Greek mythologies. And we're going, what if you just take the actual mythologies that are found in the Bible from the cultures found in the Bible and create a fantasy world using those? That felt untapped. And so far as we've taken it around, we've gotten a lot of feedback from distributors that are like, this is very fresh. Like, this is very untapped.
Good. That's fantastic. Because those of us from Middle Eastern backgrounds, we don't get anything unless it's either biblical or terrorist.
Yeah.
Like there's
nothing.
Nothing. Those are the only things we ever get.
Yeah. So,
but hopefully we can help that.
Well, I appreciate that, and yes, we do need some moral stories coming out today. Angel Studios has been doing quite a bit of great stuff as of late. Sound of Freedom was fantastic. I can't believe that movie was sat on for 5 years till Angel Studios picked up the distribution. I forgot the name of the film itself, but the one about Abraham,
For His Only Son.
Yes, thank you so much. That was well done. The Chosen is very interesting. John Rumi confuses me a little bit, not in a bad way. So in Arabic, Rumi is basically a declaration. So when you say someone's Greek Orthodox in Arabic, it usually translates to Rum Orthodox. And then so Rumi is like a declaration of being Orthodox, like, oh, Haida Rumi, he's Orthodox.
Oh. Yeah.
But he converted to Roman Catholicism. So his name says that he's Orthodox, but he's Catholic. So that's the only thing that really confuses me about John himself.
That's very funny.
Yeah. But it's interesting because, as kids, we did have Gumby, which had some of these moral stories in there. We did have Davy and Goliath. We grew up with those reruns. And younger kids had Veggie Tales.
Goliath as a kid.
Yeah, I think that's what we wanted to do. We definitely wanted to come into a more grown-up market. I mean, David and I worked on Superbook for a long time. He and I worked together for 8 years on Superbook, and it's definitely aged down. And I think we really wanted to do something that was aged up a bit and could be a little more fun, a little more serious, a little more deep. It doesn't have to be so, safe, for lack of a better word.
Growing up in the 90s, there wasn't a lot. I was watching a lot of Carmen music videos, and I was watching some Veggie Tales because even as that was the best thing we had. I wasn't going to watch Bible Man, that's for sure. But you know what? There was a comic book I like to pick on Bible Man. Willie Ames was cool, man. That's fine. But there was a comic book series called Archangels. Archangels was it was done by an actual, someone who worked on Marvel Comics, but he was a Christian, and I don't remember his name, but he did this limited comic book series called Archangels, and I was very influenced. That was like the one thing as like a 14, 15-year-old, I got those books. You could get them in Christian bookstores, but you could also get them at comic shops too. So it felt like, this is real. And that always stuck with me. And, exploring that sort of Frankie Peretti world of like the supernatural realm in our modern day. And so we're kind of, it's Gabriel and the Guardians is exploring what does the unseen realm look like from, take the biblical narratives and sort of hypothesize, okay, in a fantasy setting, what did it look like? What was going on in the unseen realm during the story of Noah? What was going on in the unseen realm during the story of Moses? What were the battles like with the forces of darkness and the forces of light, during the Exodus? What was the takedown of the Egyptian gods? What was that like? And that story in a way that maps to the narrative of this man being led by the God of all things, saving his people. While in a realm that's unseen, you haven't had a combat of dark gods and the angel armies, and so I think the part of it is like there's some cool things to tell there. There's some stories that could be told there.
And just real quick, it was Patrick Scott that wrote the scripts for Archangel, so we wanted to give him as much credit as possible.
Yeah, Patrick Scott. That's cool.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic that you're doing this, because this is fresh, this is unique. And what I'm appreciating of what you're doing is that this is also interdenominational. So it's not just for low church, fundamental, evangelical Pentecostals, and it's not just for high church, Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Oriental Orthodox Anglicans.
Yeah.
I would say it's even unchurched.
Yeah.
Unchurched is an evangelical term for people that don't understand, where it's interdenominational without being tied to a specific denomination. Yeah. Yeah, we got to freshen it up for a secular audience too, Al.
I know.
No. I mean, I think as best we can, we want to there are these beautiful stories, and I think that there's a generation demographic that they are, because of the temperature and the just the current political sphere, they're going, I don't want to look at that. I don't even want to open your Bible. And so, but these stories are beautiful and they're timeless. They're these timeless truths. And it's like, could we take those and package them in a modern vessel, and make it something that just because they're good, just because it's well made, they're good stories, the animation's great. Could we get some of those kids to go, I'm going to watch this because this looks just cool. And I think that's where we're going. Yeah. Can we step over that chasm that has been sort of created, and can we find a place where we can get kids that don't have any interest in church to read this and go, man, I'd like to know a little more about whatever influenced this, whatever inspired this. I want to read more about that. That's kind of what I think we're hoping to do.
So it's definitely a modern take on C.S. Lewis and what he did with the Chronicles of Narnia.
For sure. Yeah. C.S. Lewis, big influence.
Yeah. David,
he was a great theologian too. So
he was. He helped Tolkien convert to Anglicanism.
Yeah.
Which the Anglican Church is in question at this point, that if we can even still consider it Christianity. But that's a different topic.
A different call.
Yes. David, you were talking earlier about how everything was either extremely kiddie or very moralistic. And that was a big part of faith-based films, where it's like, the guy just got out of jail. He's angry. He's an atheist. He gets one little Bible preaching, turned his whole life around, and it's all over. Yeah. And then we get stories that are coming out recently from the people that did God Is Not Dead with Nefarious, which is an incredible story. Sound of Freedom, again, from Angel Studios, where you guys are working with on this project. And then, films like Father Stew, which are a faith-based film, but not in the sense that you think, because Father Stew was a really fallen and broken man before his conversion to Catholicism and long before his ordination. And it is such a redemptive story that, the average secular person can relate to it.
Yeah.
I think that we need a lot more stories like those last three that you mentioned, like Father Stew, like Sound of Freedom, like Nefarious. And I think we need a lot less stories like God's Not Dead. I personally, because I feel like it, at least in my experience, and I know it's anecdotal, the only people that I know that went to see God's Not Dead were already Christians. And I went to see it, and from a storytelling standpoint, really turned me off, because I felt like, the whole movie was just trying to convince you of an argument, which is not what movies do best. Movies best connect with you, again, on an emotional level. One of my favorite filmmakers is Hayao Miyazaki, and he's Studio Ghibli, or Studio Ghibli. He says it Ghibli. The correct pronunciation is Ghibli. There's a lot of debate on that. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're still here.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I thought I lost you guys. But yeah, I look at Miyazaki, I look at just really good filmmakers, and I'm just like, why are we not telling really good stories? And another thing too is that, in my experience, most Christian media is so concerned with their message being understood by anybody that watches their thing. And it's like, usually good art is something that people can have a conversation about, and they can wonder about, and they can think, what do you think this meant? What do you think the author actually meant there? I don't want our story to be something that is like, it's so easy to understand that everyone's like, yeah, this means this and that means that, and like everybody knows this because they said it in the story. Right. It's like, no, like, you shouldn't, like, you shouldn't have to explain everything, because then you take away all the things that make it interesting. It's like
yeah.
Go ahead, Jason. I was trying to think something.
Well, I should say good art, right? Good art should inspire questions, not tell you answers. Like, even faith-inspired art, it should make people it should inspire conversation and questions, not walk away being like, okay, they told me all the answers. That's not art. And so, no, I completely concur with you, man.
Yeah, and there's also international films too that do this. So there was a Greek filmmaker that made the story of Saint Nectarios. It's called Man of God, and the film's in English, but it's set in Greece, and it's a majority Greek cast. And that tells his story of suffering and still enduring. And then there's Ostrov, the Russian film about a monk, and it translates to the island. And it was basically, his whole redemptive story on how he had to shoot somebody in order to save his life. So his whole life is of repentance for thinking that he murdered somebody. And so I like exactly what you guys are doing with this, because it's not just hammering you over the head with the message.
Right. Yeah, no, like you were saying, like with Father Stu, I watched Father Stu, and it was like, it felt very honest. It felt very authentic. And it's like, that's what,
felt real.
It felt real. Like it just a lot of the, and I think this is changing, right? This is changing, coming from Christians in media, but it's like a lot of stuff just feels fake. It just feels cheesy. And what's really interesting to me is that I feel like Hollywood is now going down that path of shoving messages and, lessons down your throat. And people are turning off to it. People are like, it's like, why are,
and especially from the opposition,
big budget? Right.
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
David,
Like,
from
why are
the
these big budget?
No, please continue.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I said we just have to specify that they are shoving the message down like the way Christian media was, but it is from the opposition. So we got to make sure to reference that it's the opposition, not the Christian side.
Yeah, it's funny for years that they complained about Christians doing that, yet that's what they do now all the time in all aspects.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that the very thing that made Christian media, made us go, I'm a little ashamed of the Christian media, my people's media, in the 90s and the 2000s, and even still today to some extent, but they're doing the same things that made our media bad. We were trying to shove a message. We were trying to use our art as a platform to tell people things that we wanted to shove in, and they're doing the same thing. Propaganda mixed into art. It doesn't work. You'd think they would have learned that from the terrible Christian media that they said for years was terrible, and it's like they're doing the same thing now. It's like, man, they didn't learn,
Right.
Yeah, and they're starting to receive the same kind of pushback now,
right?
Where people are rejecting their ideologies because it's like David said and Jason said, it's like they didn't learn from what Christians were trying to do. They didn't learn the lesson. They just figured, we'll come out with our stuff and shove it down. And people go to movies, people go watch TVs to escape. They don't go there to have these things slammed to them in the face. They want an escape. And that's what we're hoping to do, is tell great stories. The three of us decided in the beginning when we got together that this was going to be story driven. It wasn't going to be, now granted, we want great animation. We want great visual effects. We want a great visual style. But our goal mainly is to have fantastic stories that drive the film or the shows, and not just beautiful visuals with terrible stories.
Yeah. Well, thank God for that, because there's some things that look fantastic that are just awful, and there's some things that are great that just look terrible. And you guys are finding the balance. But let's touch upon the voice cast as well, because you got some heavy hitters. Johnny Yong Bosch is in here. James Arnold Taylor, I interviewed him a long time ago when the Ratchet and Clank movie came out. One of the nicest people I've ever met. Yes. Incredibly humble person. I think he lives out in Tennessee now.
Yes.
Matt Lanter, you got in this, like, how did the cast come about? Because, usually when people do an independent project, you don't get the heavy hitters like Johnny and James.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really interesting story because I had worked on, I don't really come from the entertainment industry, but I did have the fortune of working about a decade ago, a decade or so ago, on a project that was intended to raise awareness for human trafficking through basically an online manga story. And we connected with Johnny, and he's a believer, and he loved it and offered his voice in promotion for it, and did some recording for us, and I just stayed in contact with him over the years. I mean, I went back into doing e-learning, which is my kind of main I kept that connection, and when this started to develop, I reached out to him and I said, "Hey man, take a look at this pitch. Tell me if you'd be willing to just record." And did it for as a friend. And
Did we just lose? Jason's back.
Oh,
He's back.
I'm back. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're still waiting on David to pop back in. I know his reception was getting wonky out there too.
Where did you lose me?
So you were talking about Johnny, and you pitched him the idea of the story just to do a read for you, and then what happened from there?
So he read for us and did for the torch that we submitted our pitch to Angel Studios, and then once we got picked up, I went back to him and I said, "Hey, would you come and do the whole series?" And he said, "Yeah, for sure, man." He's like, "I love this story," and he just was Gabriel, like almost immediately. It was like, "Dude, that's it, you're Gabriel." And then I got connected to James through actually a guy named Dan Hasseltine. He's the lead singer of Jars of Clay, and I.
Oh no.
We're freezing up a little bit. These are technical difficulties that we're going to deal with. But
like,
Jason,
oh, sorry.
No, it's okay,
sorry,
man.
man.
A little bit of reception on your end, but Jars of Clay, you were mentioning how you met James.
Yes. So Dan Hasseltine introduced me to James Arnold Taylor. Basically, was like, I got a friend who does cartoon voices, and I was like, okay, cool. And then he sent me the contact, and it was James Arnold Taylor. I was like, more than just like a neighbor that does cartoon voices, man. Like, so that's it. And then James introduced us to Matt. They both loved the project and they wanted to get involved.
Yeah, it was fun. It was funny because we were all talking when we got that information. We were like, "Who is this guy? Like, does he just do neighborhood voices for the kids to entertain them?" And then when we researched into it, we're like, "Holy mackerel! It's Obi-Wan Kenobi."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like when I saw the list, I was like, how did they pull all these guys off? This is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that is just honestly.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've got some more coming.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the final project too and being able to review this series.
The Lord has opened up a lot of doors, to be honest. Just completely, we've followed a lot of breadcrumbs. As as a dude that's never worked in the industry before, that just had an idea, there's been a lot of breadcrumbs that has been like, okay, I guess we'll check that out, and then that takes you to the next thing, and that takes you to the next thing.
I just think it's hilarious how you and I became connected with this, because I was the voice of Jesus in that Bible project, and now here you were listening to it. So we didn't even have a connection, and that was my friend Katie Lee, who's the one that hooked me up with that job. So Katie, I love you as always. I will always give you credit for everything. So
yeah, no, that's so crazy. Because I mean, that was really it. That was like the spark. It was like, I just consumed so many of those, their series, like the Son of Man series, and then over and over and over again. They have a whole series about trees and the Tree of Life, and it's phenomenal. And all of that, I just began to create this groundwork for these themes that I wanted to touch on in our series. Like, even though it's this high fantasy action packed, it was like all of those themes, like the multi episode themes that they do. I mean, we're working in, the idea of a second born, and it's like one of the main characters, actually Matt Lanter's character, he basically is one of the Bakura, and the Bakura means second born. So
yeah, Al, I have to ask you, do you have kids of your own? Because I know Jason's kids were excited about this and said this is the type of show that they'd want. What about your family and their interest in all of this as well? Since they're used to you working in the industry, sometimes it's like, oh, dad's just working, but like, how does it look for the rest of the family?
My kids are excited, and even today, one of mine was sending me music clips like, "Hey, listen to this sound. Hey, listen to this sound." So I was sending them to the guys because I was like, because that's the stage we're at too right now, is we're working on music for the show. But yeah, they're excited. My kids love anime, all of them. I've got 5 of them, and they all love anime, and they range from 16 to 33. And yeah, they're excited for it. My daughter, when she started finding out some of the people we had involved, she was like, "Oh, I've met them at this con, or I've met them at that con." And she was like, "Now you guys have them." And I was like, "Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy." But yeah, no, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm doing this for like 33 years. So it's a lot of fun though.
It looks like it, man. By the way, are you guys doing it like the voiceover in Western tradition where you do the voiceover first and then the animation? Or are you doing it Japanese style with anime where they do the animation first and then they add the ADR afterwards?
So currently we're doing the voiceovers and then doing the animation traditional Western style. We did have a plan, and I think it's still the plan we're trying to work with finding connections and distribution in Japan. We did have a plan to do simultaneous release in North America and Japan.
There we go.
And we will have Japanese actors, for all of that. But yeah, it's going to kind of be a little bit in reverse.
And how?
Sorry, guys.
No, it's all right, man. We know what it's like using 5G while traveling. So,
jeez,
yeah. But with the distribution and working with Angel Studios, how have they been with you guys on this project? Are they kind of hands off and go, "We saw what you're doing, we like the direction you're going in, have at it"? Or is there a little bit of notes coming in from the studio the way some of the big boys do it?
No, it's been a lot different. I mean, Jason can talk to it as well, but they've been fantastic. They've just let us go, let us do our thing, and they haven't tried to interfere in anything. I mean, I'm sure if we came up with something crazy that was totally off the, what they're trying to do, they'd say something. But our vision, their vision is similar, so I think that they've just left us alone.
They're very pro creator and let the creator tell the story and do the thing. And so they just want to support creators and help raise the funds for creators, and then help give them a form. Really they thought, like when we first, before we even went through the torch process, they had a couple thoughts, but outside of that, they've been very hands off creative.
We have excuse me, we have Angel Studios, who has kind of been like the sleeper group that just came out of nowhere to some people and have been putting out some incredible stuff. And then there's Pure Flix and a bunch of other organizations that are popping up that are pushing Christian media or creating family-friendly media even. How significant is that as not only Christians but as parents to see some more family-friendly stuff? Because for the last 30 years we've seen dad's an idiot, mom hates her life, the kids are smarter than the parents, which worked for Married with Children because that was something new in 1987. But since 1987 on, that seems to have been the continuous trend.
Yeah. Did you want to answer that, Jason? Or
no, go ahead, man. Why don't you answer that one? That's a good one for you. Being a
family
man.
Family man. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, we just want to tell great stories. We want to tell stories that aren't putting anyone down. I had a question when we were at GalaxyCon in Austin. LGBTQ person came up to me and said, "Are you guys going to be anti-LGBTQ?" And I said, "I don't think we intend to be anti anything." I said, "I think we intend to tell great stories." Now, if that message changes their life, well, then fine. But we're not going out of our way to be any sort of, anti anything. We just want to tell great stories. We want to tell a message. And, again, we don't want to preach a message to anybody. We're not trying to proselytize. We're trying to tell these stories in an allegorical way, in a fantasy style that can be accepted by everybody. And again, like I said, unchurched, or you said non-evangelical, that's our goal. Our goal is to reach those people who, like, I think David, or maybe it was Jason said it earlier, that would never open up a Bible, that would never, hear these stories in any other way. And again, even if it affects them in a positive manner, let's say they never become Christians, but they take something away from it that changes their life for the better, then, that's what we're trying to do.
I think that there's a unique opportunity to present family in a way that is going to actually feel fresh. You know what I mean? I think that we can, for so long, media has been showing a deconstructed family, that a constructed family is actually fresh, is actually kind of new, and to say, hey, look, here's what family should look like, right? And here's why it's powerful and strong and creates people full of identity. I think that there's a message there that will feel like very like new all of a sudden.
And with the series, are you doing a manga to be a companion piece to the anime?
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's read like a traditional from right to left. So it's going to be cool.
So you're just still going full Semitic style with Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, Urdu, and everything else, just going right to left as well.
Yeah, exactly. I just created a new logo that is actually in Hebrew, but it's kind of that like Japanese kanji logo style, but it's Hebrew. It says Gabriel and the Guardians. I was pretty proud of it. It looks cool.
I dig it. Now, are you going to do multiple dubs as well in various languages? Because I know Al had said you're hoping for a Japanese release. Are you looking for your Japanese cast at this point as well?
Not yet, but we do want to do we do want to do multi-country release, and we've had a significant amount of integrators that have worldwide, global distribution, particularly in the APAC region, that have been extremely interested and said they felt like this is a project that would do very well over there.
Well,
yeah, that's another thing we haven't discussed, is that our studios are in the APAC region as well, who have worked on traditional animes. Some of the biggest animes you've seen out there, they've worked on that.
The studio that did the animation in the trailers that you've seen, they've worked on Megalobox, they worked on Pokemon Sun and Moon, they worked on Lupin the Third, and they're doing our manga as well.
And that's fantastic, because the beautiful thing is the artwork isn't kiddie either. This is for late teens, early 20s audience, which I think has been neglected either with the people in the church, capital C, the body of Christ, or the unchurched, as Alan uses that term from the evangelical standpoint, the people that have never been influenced or want to be influenced by Christendom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that generation, that age gap, we just did. There was nothing for them, and that's been consistent even since when I was a kid. It's like you've got media up until an age, 13, 14, and then, and even that might be pushing it, and then you don't have anything. There's nothing that's interesting until you get into your late 20s, and that carries over to what we see the people that are in church. You got people that are in church until they're in their teens, and then you see a huge departure until people come back in their 30s. And so it's like a wonder if it's just that they feel like there's nothing for them, nothing is speaking to them.
And it's also the influence of university life, and they're like, oh, I'm getting married, I might as well go back because this is where the family unit's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That was something in graduate school that we discussed a lot, because a lot of people fell off during the college years, like between junior year of high school and, I think 23.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And that seems to be your target demographic.
I could testify to that.
It is. Yeah. As we've done the research, the demographics that we've seen show that student aged kids anywhere from basically like 6-7 years old all the way up through end of college, so 24, are 8 out of 10 are watching anime regularly.
Yeah, and the conventions are huge. Anime Expo out here in LA. There's Anime California. So many anime conventions here. Galaxy Con. There's Impulse. There's so many different anime conventions that it would not make sense to ignore that community, since they're outshining the traditional Western comic book industry, which has completely fallen off and turned into IP for films and television.
Yeah. Anime Expo is huge. I went there a few years back and I was blown away. I was like, this is probably the biggest convention I've ever seen.
Yeah. And it's extremely well organized too. That's what's beautiful about Anime Expo.
Yeah.
So that one's a great one. If you ever come to LA, that is definitely the one to check out 4th of July weekend.
Yeah. We've been talking about what our schedule might be, in promotion, especially next year as we're getting closer to a release. Like what kind of presence do we want to have in what conventions?
Mm-hmm. You might want to check out Dragon Con in Atlanta. That's a great convention.
Yeah. That's we were talking about.
Yeah, we looked at it. And I just think our actors weren't going to be there, right? So we decided.
Yeah, we wanted our first one to be one where two of the three main actors were at GalaxyCon Austin, so it just made sense.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if that's the announcement, and Texas is a prime candidate for this.
Yeah, it is. So,
gentlemen, I unfortunately David couldn't pop back on because his reception was so bad, but I do want to ask you this before we end the formal conversation and then talk a little bit off camera. What would you like for the pan-Christian audience, the church, capital C, from the high church to the low independent churches, to get from this story? And what would you like the secular and the unchurched to understand about Gabriel and the Guardian?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what I'd love for the church to get is that to see that there's a deeper beauty to this book that we live our lives by. There are themes that I grew up. My dad was there. I grew up in the church, and it wasn't until I started really looking that I saw that there's so much more. There's way more than I ever imagined going on in those Hebrew writers were, I think, maybe some of the best and most thoughtful writers in human history. They're on a different level in terms of writing just circles around everybody else, in terms of how they're connecting and hyperlinking their themes, and how they're remixing, that garden narrative, and then it's remixed in the next chapter, and remixed and rethought, and they're adding and they're hyperlinking, and it's just this beautiful woven basket of narratives and themes. And I think it would be awesome if the church could move away from the bumper stickers of our scripture and move into the deep interconnected themes that are there. And then I would say that for the non-Christian, the unchurched, the unreligious crowd, I just hope that we can tell a great story that reveals some sense of hope and truth, that even at a core level, they'll recognize it and they'll go, oh, I want to know a little bit more about this beautiful story, wherever this is being pulled from, this narrative that's playing out, where did that come from? In the same way that people probably went and read a bunch of Norse texts after Thor, Marvel's Thor came out. Probably, I bet there was an uptick in going and reading, the actual Norse sagas, you know what I mean? And that's what I hope, that it would lead people to want to go and learn more about these beautiful stories.
Would you guys also do a manga series based on the apocryphal text? Because when the Bible was canonized in 325, the Apocrypha was part of the full canon. And then eventually, post-Protestant Reformation, it was slowly weeded out. Would you actually do something apocryphal related or deuterocanonical, depending on which term you prefer to use?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my opinion is that the pre-Nicaea texts are what I want to pull from. And so, Genesis, but definitely the book, I love the book of Jasher. I love the book of Enoch. I think that they fill in, I like to say that the book of Enoch is essentially the Silmarillion of the Bible. I think it fills in this great backstory. It's not necessary, but it is amazing. And so no, I would like Gabriel and the Guardians is, for instance, Gabriel is, the garden realm in our story. We call it Paradem, which if you look up the word Paradem, you'll know what we're doing there. But he's the keeper of that realm. And that's pulled right out of the first book of Enoch, actually, where it says that Gabriel was the keeper of Eden.
That's fantastic. Gentlemen, where can we find you on social media and Gabriel and the Guardians as well to follow up with everything?
Yeah, you can go to GabrielandTheGuardians.com, or you can go to angel.com/guardians. They go to the same place, actually. And then, just find us on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, just Gabriel and the Guardians. You can find us if you search for us, it'll pop right up. So come and hang out. I'm very active on there. I'm always in there talking to people and commenting and being pretty active. So
yeah, you may catch any one of us in there at any given time.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Al Moore, Jason Moody. Unfortunately, David Cunningham couldn't pop back on, but thank you to David as well for talking to us today about Gabriel and the Guardians, the project that we'll be releasing within the next year. Manga companion series is coming out as well for the anime, all through Angel Studios and their publishing house. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor and a blessing.
Yeah, thank you so much.